Welcome to Oxford Analytica's weekly look at the global political economy. I'm Tom Wales, Director of Analysis at OA, and I'm joined by Dr. Jill Hedges, our Senior Latin America Desk Analyst. Market attention has been focused on fragility in various emerging economies in recent days. Actually, it's been a process that's been evident ever since former Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke announced that the U.S. Federal Reserve would begin tapering its quantitative easing program in May 2013. But now concern has become a lot more acute. There have been steep falls in various EM currencies and concern about crisis and contagion. Now, Jill, the use of the C word vis-a-vis Argentina tends to provoke something amounting to panic. Do you think that's appropriate yet?
I always think that we should be very, very careful about using the words Argentina and crisis together because, for good reasons, people tend to get extremely nervous. I don't think that we're looking at a crisis in Argentina, certainly not of the magnitude of 2001, which is what some people seem to be anticipating. There is not a debt crisis at the moment. There is not a recession. There is not a high level of unemployment. We do definitely have a severe currency problem. International reserves have fallen to their lowest level for a very long time. They're only about $29 billion. Now, debt repayments are being made out of those reserves. The peso has fallen from about 6 to the dollar to 8 at the moment, and the lifting of controls on dollar purchases doesn't seem to be reassuring the markets or indeed Argentine consumers. So I think we're looking certainly at a great deal of instability in the coming months, but I think it would be extremely premature and extremely exaggerated to use the word crisis.
So what, if anything, does the situation in Argentina have to do with the situation in other emerging economies, if anything? And secondly, what are the external effects of what's going on in Argentina right now? Who will feel the effects, other than psychological, on market participants?
Yeah, the psychological impact is the concern, and I think market participants should be very careful about extrapolating the Argentine situation to other emerging markets. I think the international environment is the lesser part of the situation in Argentina. It's basically a domestic problem. Fiscal revenues are not rising as fast as public spending. Public spending is being financed by central bank reserves. Debt payments are being made with central bank reserves. Growth has slowed dramatically. Inflation is running close to 30%, and the depreciation that's happened so far this year is going to continue, and that will drive inflation and wage demands even further. And of course, this will affect competitiveness, and it will affect the possibility of imports. So it's a domestic problem more than an international problem, although obviously lower commodity prices internationally affect an economy like Argentina, which is a very big exporter of food commodities.
What about the impact on Brazil?
It's a very serious impact for Brazil manufacturers because Brazilian manufacturing has become less competitive over the years, especially vis-a-vis China. Argentina is about the largest export market for Brazilian manufacturers, especially cars. That's not a huge percentage of Brazilian exports as a whole, but psychologically it's a real blow to the Brazilians if they see their manufactured exports fall further. Almost all of Brazil's car exports go to Argentina. The Argentine car market was extremely buoyant last year, partly because people buy cars as a hedge against inflation. If we see a major fall in the peso, which we're seeing, and a major increase in inflation, then that's likely to dry up, and that will have an effect on Brazil. It has an effect on Uruguay also, which is less of an issue internationally, but Uruguay depends pretty heavily on Argentine tourism and also on deposits by Argentine savers. So if people feel the need to start taking money out of the system because of the high level of inflation and they need to sustain their own spending, then it affects Uruguayan banks.
Now, finally, what's the impact on Argentina's domestic political situation? You and I have discussed before how unlike in other countries where during times of crisis national leaders tend to step to the fore, the president has been largely absent from the public scene in recent weeks. What are the medium to long-term implications for politics?
Well, the president has had a very, very high media profile for most of her term. When things have started to go badly, she has tended to step further and further away from the spotlight. Also, she's had a number of health issues in the last few months. It does generate more uncertainty when she suddenly disappears because nobody else appears to be sort of an authorized spokesman for the government. I think politically the situation is complicated because there are presidential elections in October of 2015. Christina Kirchner can't stand for re-election. She doesn't have an obvious successor. And the government doesn't appear to be tremendously interested in handing over a tidy package to the government that takes office. So there's an increasing feeling of political vacuum here because there's no strong opposition or a strong alternative candidate either. I think what we're going to see is further deterioration of this government's political weight. I think greater uncertainty. This is probably going to imply also more protests, more strikes in favor of wage demands. So we're looking at, I think, a very volatile couple of years, and the government that will come in will probably be less improvisational in terms of economic policy and probably more business friendly, but they're going to inherit a very complicated package that is not going to be very easy to resolve.
Well, thanks, Jill. No immediate crisis in Argentina then, but certainly hold on to your hats, particularly if you're a foreign investor adventurous enough to stick your toes in those particular waters. Please join us again next week for another look at the global political economy. You can follow Jill's Argentina coverage and our other coverage of ongoing turmoil in emerging markets in the Oxford Analytica Daily Brief. Thanks for joining us.